チューナーモンスターレベル4フランガンマジシャンそしてレベル4フォースレイダーをチューニング集いき願いが新たに輝こしてなる怒りさず見となれシンクロ召喚HishōせよStardust Dragon Oh my goodness, those were the days, guys. Those were the golden days. Greetings, Harbingers. Welcome to Yliaster, PewDiePie's favorite channel, your realm of personal development, Stoicism, Cyber Alchemy, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Yes, finally, let's talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a masterpiece. It's my favorite card game, my favorite anime, among others, of course. I am psyched about Yu-Gi-Oh! So, I'm going to tell a little bit about my story with Yu-Gi-Oh! And talk about the animes, especially the Holy Trinity, Duel Monsters, GX, and 5Ps. So, in 2002, I was 11, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime started to be aired in my country. And when I watched that thing for the first time, Yu-Gi played the monsters and they're manifesting in the arena, I got extremely psyched. Well, it was an actual fever. Every kid in school, every boy, pretty much, I'm not sure about girls. Well, I wish Yu-Gi-Oh! Were famous amongst girls, but one can only wish for so much, right? So it was an epidemic. That was all we talked about. And I remember that time, the pirate cards went viral, and we could buy this whole pirate decks with the cards with wrong names, wrong attack points. It was a mess. It wasn't original because I lived in a very small town and it wasn't original. So, and I couldn't afford, of course, because it was expensive. My parents couldn't afford that to me, and I got sick because I watched the richer kids playing it in the interval from the school, and I was there like, really wanting to play too. So what I did, I got those tennis boxes, cartoon boxes, and cut it, and I couldn't draw, so I just wrote the card names and the attacks. So I remember I was bothering my brother to play with me. But I have an older brother. He never liked these things. I think back then he even despised a little that I enjoyed my weird tastes. He was always the bright kid, and I've been always the black sheep. So it was funny. Well, a few years later, I could have a computer, and then wow, I played every single Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game from gaming you can imagine, but the one that's close to my heart, by obvious reasons, is Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories. That game, guys, that game is so... well, it's... despite its imperfections, for the time it was released, it's such a well-done game. It's extremely pleasant to play. The campaign mode, the free duel system, in which you have to duel several times the opponents to get the rare cards. The problem with that game, it was unfinished because there are exactly 82 cards that you could not drop at all, no matter how many duels you could have. For example, the ultimate mystery of that game was the Magician of Black Chaos. The last card, the card 722, the card that was in the game's cover, and nobody from Simon to Duel Master K to Nightmare, no one ever had used that card, and you could only use it by cheating through Game Shark. Even its ritual card and the sacrifices was just impossible. So cards like Summon Skull undropped. And anyway, despite all that, once you got to the Metal Mage, you could just beat him several times, and in about 200-300 duels, you could obtain 3 Meteorite Dragons along with other powerful cards, so you could finish the game. And in the S-PO rank, and in the S-Tech rank, which is gaining by pretty much mostly activating lots of spell cards, trap cards, but overall the most effective way, yet longer, well, it's not the most effective, but the most precise way to win S-Tech is making your opponents uses more cards than you, so he could run out of cards before you. So it's an S-Tech. And in about, I think in less than 50 duels, you can drop 3 Megamorphs and Bright Castles from Pegasus J. Crawford. So that game, guys, that game is a bomb. Wow, I have so many hours in that game. And years later, I gotta give the credit to the amazing Brazilian and Latin community, hacking community, they did an outstanding job making modded versions of Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories. So one that's remarkable to me was the Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories, in which you could drop these cards by dueling several times with the opponents, and the Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories 2, in which they introduced the Egyptian god cards, and the extremely hard difficult. So you had to duel a lot and figure out the fusion system was just brilliant. These two games is a masterpiece. It was everything we wanted from the original Yu-Gi-Oh!, which was a masterpiece per se already. So amazing games, amazing times, and well, I really am into Yu-Gi-Oh! So and that's just Forbidden Memories. I didn't even start talking about the anime yet. Well, as I was saying, let's go back a little. There's a lot of mosquitoes here. So yes, I was a kid and I couldn't have money to afford cards, but I had to watch the anime hidden from my mother. Every kid can relate that, because the world was way more conservative back then. The adults, I think, where religion had, at least in my family, had a huge weight, and you couldn't just be in the living room of your home watching Yu-Gi-Oh! And your mother suddenly hears, "I summoned the incarnated Archean to the field. Let's do the black magic ritual. The contract has been sealed. Now we're unleashing the powers of light and darkness. I summon the magician of black chaos," and things like that. This is the devil thing. Turn that off, otherwise you're gonna be grounded. So I had to watch it. I had to find a way to watch without my mother discover. So when I had computer and internet in my country came a little bit later than in the US. So we're about a decade later in these things. So for me, for example, while in the US, the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo was a thing in the 90s, in my country, it was a thing in the 2000s, late 90s, more in the 2000s, at least for me. So when I had internet, I I downloaded all the Yu-Gi-Oh! At that moment, it was only Duel Monsters and GX. 5Ds was 5Ds started in 2008, so it wasn't airing in the time I downloaded, and I went straight to the Japanese version, to the original version, because, well, for kids, if you watched, let me tell you something, if you watched Yu-Gi-Oh! From 4Kids or similar, dude, it's like the original is way better, because they kept the original card format, the dialogues, they cut some scenes for kids version, so they censored a lot of things unnecessarily, and so the original is way darker and it's way better. And there is this discussion on the internet why Yu-Gi-Oh! GX Season 4 was never dubbed in 4Kids. Well, that season is a psychological masterpiece. It has everything. It's extremely dark and shadowy, and lots of esoteric integration, Carl Jung things, Jaden, Judai, Yubel. I love that season. I love Yu-Gi-Oh! GX as well. So of course they wouldn't do the job to redub, and they'd have to censor pretty much everything about that season. So watch the originals with subtitles. Thank me later. And of course, when I grew older and I started to work, I had money to buy cards. So I have lots of cards, lots of decks, and at some point in my life, I had time and friends to play with. It was one of the best years of my life. About 2009, 2011, I worked all week, went to college at night, but on weekends, I went to my friend's house, and where there was 3 of us, me, Maximilian, and Hiroki, and we spent all the afternoon playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Crazy and listening to Rammstein. And we had this tournament, and guys, I miss those days so very much. And life, everyone followed their path, and I'm on another continent, and then life happens. And I have my cards to these days, precious cards. I have some rare cards that worth some money. But wow, I wish I could have friends again to duel in a regular basis. My favorite deck is the Elemental Hero deck, by the way. That's, of course, my signature deck after Judice. And so, where was I? Yeah, let's talk about the animes a little bit. I'll do it backwards. I'll start talking about 5Ds first, and then I'll talk about GX, and then about Duel Monsters. So, let's see here. So let's keep going. I'm about to go to my morning run, and let's continue the video to the running site. So Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, a lot of people criticize it because of the motorcycling duel. And when I saw the concept for the first time, I was like, huh, what? Card games on motorcycles. The name card games on motorcycles. But when I started watching it, I was psyched. This introduction of the Synchro summon, and Yusei was extremely charismatic. It was a bit more serious than the Pharaoh and Judai in the early seasons. And like that more shadowy atmosphere, the class debate between the inhabitants of Satellite and the inhabitants of New Domino City, the poverty, the politics. Wow, Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds is a masterpiece. And if you think about Stardust Dragon, the Yusei's ace monster, the one I summoned here in the beginning of the video, Takahashi is a genius, and may God have his soul. He passed away, I think, a couple years ago. I think he was trying to save someone in a scuba diving session, and he ended up drowning himself. Wow, such a tragedy. And well, we have a lot to thank this man for. So I was talking about Stardust Dragon. If you think about it, you can trace a parallel. Look what I'm gonna say between Stardust Dragon and our Lord Jesus Christ. What's the effect of Stardust Dragon? And the name of the effect, Victim Sanctuary. This detail, I think I'm about to be the first person on the internet to ever say this. Stardust Dragon's effect, when a card that has a destruction effect is activated, you can counter this effect and null the card's activation and destroy that card by tributing Stardust Dragon, send to the graveyard. He's tributed. There's a difference between send to the graveyard and tribute. Of course, going to the graveyard or remove from play. But by tributing Stardust Dragon, you can null and destroy the card's effect that has a destruction effect. And in the end of the turn, Stardust Dragon resurrects to the field. So, what figure in history had done that in the same way? Well, Jesus. He defeated death by sacrificing himself, only to return resurrected 3 days later. So, I think Takahashi, I'm not sure if he did the effect. I had to check this information. I know he did. He himself draw the Stardust Dragon's design, but I'm not sure if it was Konami who designed the effect or if it was himself. So anyway, the concept of his effect, I think it's a parallel with Jesus Christ. So this is Stardust Dragon and Jesus Christ. And the name of the effect, and again, I think I'm gonna be the first person on the internet to ever say this, is called Victim Sanctuary. Who was a victim of the sanctuary, if not Jesus himself? Who plotted his own death, if not the sanctuary back then? The Romans executed him, but who plotted it? Well, the sanctuary. Anyway, so the cards, they have these meanings. If you go deep, you're gonna find so much meaning. Takahashi was a genius because lots of cards have this esoteric concept behind them. Stardust Dragon is just one example. I can give you another. The whole Zera card trivia, from War of Zera to Zera Dement, how he was downgrading from the Sanctuary in the Sky to Pandemonium, and then when he has nothing left, he sacrifices everything to become that hideous creature, Zera Dement, one of the most badass vanilla ritual cards. I love ritual summon, by the way. I think it's the most badass type of summoning, yet extremely underused because the game mechanics didn't help the ritual summoning this much. So as you know, I'm an old school duelist. I'm not much into these new summoning forms. I kind of like Exceed, Pendulum, and Link. I think they're too overwhelming. They make your turn endure 10 minutes, and then the other player can do nothing. But meta is not. It's another discussion. Anyway, so that's a little bit about 5Ds. Now let's talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. In Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, maybe it's one of the most profound Yu-Gi-Oh! Works, especially season 3 and 4, when you see a true development on Judai's character. And of course, seasons 1 and 2 was the base to it, because he was presented as that silly, joyful boy who dreams of becoming the next king of games. So he's presented as the naive, silly boy, and you can see his development so well done. And at the end of season 3, I get the quivers, but just by talking about this, you see his encounter with Yubel, which happens to be his anima, his feminine side he had lost. And then at the end, with the super polymerization, he integrates himself with his anima counterpart, and he becomes whole, and he emerges as the Supreme King to season 4. So the season 3 and especially season 4 of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX carries this profound Jungian integration theory of confronting your shadows and integrating these shadows to you, not by letting it rule you, as it happened with Judai in season 3 when he emerged as the Supreme King, but then he managed to grow mature by fearing seeing his friends perish. He had to not defeat Yubel, but integrate her to himself. And then he returns in season 4, changed, matured as an adult, and you see he is no longer that silly, naive kid from the beginning. He was serious and more conscious. It's such a vivid, interesting character development. And at the end, he had that epic duel with Pharaoh himself, which I believe that was never revealed, but I believe it was a dream. He just had a dream. He never dueled Atem, actually, or Yugi. He duels with Yugi, and Atem appears in the end, the Pharaoh summoning Slifer, the Sky Dragon. He uses, what's that card name? Dark Renewal? Kuromazu Fukatsu no Hitsugi. That's the card name. And he uses the Seigei no Shisui, the Spirit Mirror Sealed, to change the type of the monster. The one I'm reviving is not a magician, but a god. And then he brings Slifer, the Sky Dragon, and Slifer roars at Neos. Oh my goodness! And then the duel ends, guys. Wow, it gives me the quivers. You see how much excited I get talking about these things. Oh my goodness, so good, so many good memories. So if you like Yu-Gi-Oh! And you should read Carl Jung and understand more about integrating your feminine side, your anima, or if you're a woman, understand your masculine side and the animals and integrate so you become whole and have this extended perception of reality and change your behaviors in which in times of yore you would have behaved differently because your shadow wasn't properly integrated. So a person whose shadow is not integrated can be reckless and dangerous. But a person who has their shadows controlled and fully integrated is no longer dangerous, but they can be deadly if the cause is worth being deadly for. I guess that's maybe the biggest message of this video. And like I said, there's going to be lots of Carl Jung in this channel this year. Anyway, let's talk about Duel Monsters now. Actually, the first series was Yu-Gi-Oh! Zero, which was way more terrifying than the Duel Monsters as we know it, because Takahashi had his original idea was to have a more horror tone to the card game, but Konami and 4Kids and I think now Konami came and let's make this more like child accessible for children, for kids, so we can sell cards. They were, well, it was a strategic movement because it's maybe, I think it's sold more cards than Magic. I'm not sure, but they have Guinness records of card selling, and I sure contributed to it. Anyway, Duel Monsters. The first season of Duel Monsters is, if you think of the card game point of view, it doesn't make much sense because it's similar to what you play in Forbidden Memories. But it's great, it's nostalgic. Pegasus is I think Pegasus, the best villains, I dare say it's Pegasus, of course, and Darts. Bakura and Merrick are no better villains than Pegasus and Darts, definitely. And I love Duel Monsters. I think the character that had the greatest development was Joey, Jonouchi, and a character that I think could use more screen time and had a somewhat poor development was Seto Kaiba. And to give to make a critical point here, I think in in the Battle City, great arc by the way, when Joey tells Kaiba for them to have a duel, dispute the bronze, because the Pharaoh and Merrick was at the finals. That duel should have been way more epic. That duel was just an ordinary duel. Of course, Kaiba would win. Kaiba is a superior duelist. But I think they could use that duel to have an epic battle and make Kaiba works really hard to beat Joey, so he could finally respect Joey as a duelist. He did tell that he respects Joey after Merrick attacks him with the Winged Dragon of Ra, because he's no longer has strength to tell the Gearfried, the Iron Knight, to attack. And again, another tangent here. When he tells the story I think in season 5 about Gearfried, and then plays release restraint to summon Gearfried the Swordmaster, that's so badass, man. So I think it should have been that duel could have been more epic. Duel Monsters is great, and forgot to mention the final duel, the ceremony duel between Yugi and Atem. Of course, by far the best duel in the whole series. That duel was epic, amazing. I get the quivers and I get emotional every time I watch it. And I've watched it several times and I don't get tired. The way that duel was built, the way that Yugi predicts all Pharaoh's movements and use the gods' effects against themselves. Their only weakness is their own power, of course, because as Kaiba stated, Atem surpassed the obvious weakness of sacrificing 3 monsters to summon the Egyptian gods. And how they got nerfed in the real card game, that's so frustrating. They should have been a badass card, and they are... Obelisk is the better one, but Osiris or Slifer and Ha were extremely under nerfed in the real card game. So that duel was just epic, and I'm sure I'll be enjoying Yu-Gi-Oh! Forever. And to give another, wow, lots of noise here. To give another moment, one of the best summons in the game in 5D is when Yusei summons Shooting Crazer Dragon. It only appeared once against Zone. The way that Live Stream Dragons becomes the Synchro, I think I'll put the scene here if I can. The way it does it, and when all the 5 dragons synchronize to become Shooting Quasar Dragon was just epic. And the duel between Judai and Johan at the end of season 3, when you see Rainbow Nels and they merge with Yubel in the end, what's awesome as well. And the best duel in the entire series, Yugi versus Atem, and Atem in the end returns his spirit to the afterlife. Wow, it's just amazing. Anyway, tell me what you think. It was a very long video. I wish I could find someone in my area to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Anyway, let me know your thoughts. See you in the next video. It's time to duel El Psy Konguru.